If someone tells you everything is going to be okay and you're in a place where you're like, it doesn't feel like it's going to be okay, even if you're tapped into your fate and even if you're knowing that God is going to take care of you, you can still feel this sense that I don't know how we're going to get there.
You're listening to the Motherhood Experience, a podcast where you are part of the conversation with moms, for moms, and by moms. Let's jump into this episode with me, your host, Val Kleppen. Well, Mama, one day, whether it's a year from now, 10 years from now, or some other number in between or beyond, you will eventually have to say goodbye to your child as they launch into the adult world. Perhaps they go to college, they go to a trade school, they go for a traveling across the world or to find a job, and they are no longer under your roof. How will you respond? What is your plan for launching and letting go of your child? That is exactly what my guest covers today in this rich, beautiful, powerful conversation. Jennifer Collins not only gave me so much to think about in this regard, but she talked about it all so beautifully and compassionately. I felt like I was sitting at the feet of a mentor friend, soaking up every word she had to say. And I know, regardless of the age of your child today, when you're listening to this episode, that Jennifer is going to speak direct to your heart about maybe the fears you have of the future of your family, of your child, of what your life as a mother will be as your child ages. She's going to answer the questions that you have, or maybe that you don't realize you have already. And this is going to be an episode for the ages. Please make sure you check the show notes, follow Jennifer, reach out and contact her. Please make sure you share this episode with a friend because this will speak life into her motherhood lungs, I promise. It is my greatest pleasure to introduce you all to Jennifer Collins, my guest on this week's episode of the Motherhood Experience podcast. Jennifer, thank you for being a guest on the Motherhood Experience.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am excited to get into your story today. And first, why don't we start with ages of kids and stage of motherhood you're in?
Absolutely. I have two boys. They are 18 and 20 now. And so I am a brand new empty nester.
And is that freeing? Is it a little dagger to the heart? Is it both?
I have to say, I feel like it's something that I've been preparing for a really long time, believe it or not. I feel like I actually think about the start of my empty nest journey when my kids were in middle school, because I feel like even at that age, I was already learning how to let go of them and learning how to give them independence. And there were so many parts of that I struggled with back then. And so little by little, I kind of started thinking about this kind of slow saying goodbye and letting go that's evolved over the past 6 or 7 years as I've kind of started my own coaching business around that concept of letting go and really kind of being the best version of yourself as a mom. And so it's so interesting dropping my youngest off at college this September. It was, of course, bittersweet because you love your children, and my baby is just my heart. Both of my boys have great personalities, but it was really hard to let go of my youngest. But there was also a part of me that was really ready. I was so proud of him, proud of both of my boys, but also ready for my next chapter. But I'll also say I've been preparing for it. So it's a big step.
Yeah. We have talked on the show before about how a parent's job is to take these dependent, teeny little beings and raise them to be independent, grown people. And it is a hard transition, and it is one that does not just happen overnight. They don't just wake up at 18 and they're ready to go and you're ready for them to go. So I'm excited to talk about this more, but take me back to Jennifer before motherhood.
Yeah.
Did you have siblings yourself?
I did. I have a younger brother and sister.
Okay. So you're the oldest of three.
Mm-hmm.
It's also one of my favorite things, being an oldest child myself,
Mhm.
that so many motherhood experience guests are also oldest
That's so
eldest
interesting.
daughters. It really is. It kind of blows my mind a little bit. But so when you were ready then, growing up and launching yourself, what was that experience like for you that kind of caused you to think about it so much in parenting your own boys?
You mean in terms of when I launched and went to college, or?
Right, right.
You know, that's really an interesting question. I don't think I've thought about that. You know, I almost feel like having launched my boys now, I look back at my parents' experience differently. And I'm sure we all do this as parents. We start to respect our parents on a different level once we
Mhm,
become mothers ourselves, because you really can't appreciate what it's like to be a mother until you're in these shoes, right? And so I think about how well they parented me. And to be honest, I think it was somewhat intimidating to me, thinking about my own motherhood journey. It actually made me feel a little bit like I wasn't sure I was going to be able to live up to the example that they sent. And so it was hard for me to make that decision to be a mother in the beginning. My husband and I kind of looked at each other and said, well, I guess this seems like the best next step, but I came to my motherhood journey a little bit differently. So, but thinking about when I launched in college, I mean, my parents really gave me so much freedom and independence in so many ways, but I found it surprisingly difficult to do the same with my boys, even when they were younger. So it was really, really interesting to be in those shoes and start to see the push and pull of wanting your kids to be successful, but also seeing them struggle through so many things like
mhm.
friendships. And, I think it's also a different world that our kids are in today, social media and the pressures. I mean, we felt pressures for sure when we were growing up, but our kids are in a whole different world that we don't even fully understand all of the pressure that they're facing. And it's hard to navigate as a parent.
Yeah, you're so right. You touched on so many things, and it's hard for me to pick which direction I want to chase after now. And but even thinking of my own experience, I always assumed I would grow up to be a mother. But then once I was married, it was kind of like your situation, like, oh, maybe we should do this now. I don't know. And so once you became a mom, what changed for you more than just like you have extra people in your house and you have to buy more food? But as far as changed in your heart, mentally, emotionally, what was that like?
It's almost like that the story when the Grinch stole Christmas. I feel like my heart grew like 100 times when I became a mother. I mean, it's just amazing how much joy they've brought to my life.
Mm,
And
yeah.
I think having not I didn't expect to get emotional, but maybe it's because I've just said goodbye that I'm thinking
Yeah,
about
yeah.
my little ones. But I feel like having walked into the experience so unsure and so maybe not personally ready or feeling that I was up to the challenge, and then having been given this gift of my first son and then my second son, I remember being completely overwhelmed and scared, but I also remember feeling so grateful and so in awe of having these little beings under my protection. It was an incredible experience. And I think I really embraced motherhood in those early years. And, don't get me wrong, there were parts that were challenging and sleepless nights and all of that. But I really did love it. And I think in a lot of ways, I'm a bit of a type A person. So I feel like I really lived up to the challenge of it and organized my boys' lives. And I felt like I was really supporting them in so many ways. And maybe that's also in some respects why when we hit that middle school stage it was so difficult for me, because I wasn't in charge anymore and there were so many factors that weren't in my control or I couldn't save my boys from. And it's really when you have to start trusting their journey and trusting what's
Mm,
meant for them in such a different way that really calls on you to have a lot of faith.
yeah. So A couple of things. First of all, that was probably one of the most beautiful answers I can remember
Oh.
as a host. Secondly, crying is my spiritual gift.
I think you mentioned that on one of your podcasts, so I felt safe in this space. So thank you.
Absolutely. It's always like it's always just under the surface right here. We never know. Sometimes I get through episodes without doing it. Sometimes it happens before I hit record. So it is a welcome thing here. But also I would love to talk more about that tension between your role as a mother and protecting your children, laying down your life for them if you had to, but also giving them the freedom and the space to not only make their own choices, but make their own mistakes. Can you talk more about that?
Absolutely. It's really at the heart of what I do in my coaching business, and really think so much about this. And I feel like when I got to this place of really starting to see how scared I was to let go, and how often I realized I would just be, racked with anxiety or fear and sometimes frustration about things that I couldn't fix or I couldn't help my kids with, whether it was being upset with a friend who was mean to them back in middle school, but even
Mm,
as they got older, they start having friends that you don't know in the same way, and then they get their license, and there are just so many little moments. I mean, I think of it almost as this continuum. When your kids are little, you start thinking about letting go of their hand as they're learning to walk. And in those moments, it's exciting because there's part of you that feels like, well, I'm still here if they fall. You're still part of their experience. And so those little moments of letting go, the letting go while they're learning to ride their bike, you still feel like they're safe in your protection, that it's an environment that you can envision what could go wrong. You're planning around the outcomes, and then they get older and all of it is out of your control, including, I would say, and this is probably the most difficult part. It was certainly true for me as a mom, letting go of control of their feelings and their
mm,
actions, and we never really had control of those things. But I think when they were littler, they trusted us in a different way. So if they were hurt or scared, you could give them a hug and you could tell them they're going to be safe, and they would believe you and everything would be well. But when they get older, you can't comfort them in the same way, or they're looking to other people for answers, or they're looking to find their own inner path in a way that often needs to look separate from your path, in a way that they're defining themselves. And so for all of those reasons, I think we can find ourselves as moms kind of in this constant state of feeling unsafe. And I even think about it in terms of the way our bodies are designed. We have our fight or flight triggered on a pretty regular basis. And I think that's something that I talk a lot in my coaching business, because I think I talk to a lot of women who just say, well, I'm prone to anxiety. And we start to think it's something deficient in us, that we're responding in a way that feels out of control, whether it's because we get angry and of course we don't want to be in that space, or we feel anxious. And of course we would rather approach our kids with calm trust and love, because we're always coming from love and we're always doing our best. That really is the version of ourselves that we want to be in our best moments. But when we're triggered in these fight or flight moments, which is really how our bodies were beautifully designed, we're designed to be able to respond to danger in a moment's notice. And there's so many beautiful reasons for that, and things that have helped us even protect our kids as they've grown up. But now it often kind of creates this dynamic where we're stuck in this continuum of feeling like we're on an emotional roller coaster as our kids grow up, and for so many different reasons. And I think as mothers, we all approach those challenges in different ways, but it can really be a trying time for those reasons.
absolutely. And I kind of want to park here a little bit and dig into this because there's two things that come to mind as I'm hearing you talk about that. One is it has normalized itself in our lives today to the point where we don't understand that our bodies have triggered
Yeah.
into fight or flight, and we just are in reaction response mode all the time. And secondly, if we do realize it, even maybe subconsciously, it's easy to put the label on that trigger as our kids. Our
Mhm.
kids are stressing us out, or the mess they make is stressing us out. How can we, how do I want to say this? How can moms realize and then regulate that it's not just chaos reaction response all the time, but that there is a reason that we got to this point, and it's not necessarily because our kids did something that annoyed us or what have you. Does that make sense how I'm phrasing
Absolutely.
the
Oh, it makes
question?
perfect sense. It really does. And I think one of the first things that I think we really need to give ourselves is compassion,
Mm.
because we obviously want to show up as the best version of ourselves. And when we don't, when we react to our anger in particular, but even when we're stuck in anxiety and finding ourselves nagging or reacting to our fear in ways that we don't feel good about, it's very easy to beat ourselves up and tell ourselves we're doing things wrong. And of course, we're always working to better ourselves. But on the other hand, I think we do have to give ourselves some compassion that fight or flight response is essentially seeking safety. And our reactions are really designed to try to find safety in the fastest way possible. And so I think by even allowing yourself to acknowledge that I'm having this response, it doesn't mean something's wrong with me. And giving yourself the space to just breathe and know I am safe. Even in those moments where, something's happening, you can just say, everything's okay right now. I'm in control of my next steps. And just giving yourself that love and that grace to be able to have that space, I think is really the first step. Because I think as you said that we tend to label ourselves, and those judgments really become kind of piling on more negativity on ourselves, when really we want to be coming from love for ourselves, love for our children, and leaning into that instinct versus the judgment, I think really frees us up to be able to then clear ourselves to take the next step.
Amazing answer, and inspiring and motivating in one sense. And in my mind, and I'm hearing this and I'm like, yes, that is better than what I hoped she would have said. In my mind, I'm replaying a text conversation that I had yesterday, Jennifer.
Yeah.
And a mother texted me and said, we were talking about something as benign as FedEx, okay? FedEx, she had ordered dog food and it went to like 7 different states via FedEx before, like, it's a week overdue. And I make everyone crazy. But I make my dog's food. I make my dog's food. We had a horrible experience where we had to put our dog down before she turned 4. She went into kidney failure.
Oh.
We got this puppy now, and I'm like, everything that I can do myself to ensure a better life for her, I am doing myself. So I make my dog's food, Jennifer.
Oh, wow.
She then says, because I said something about, well, I make my dog's food, so I don't have to wait for it to go. she said, I was thinking about this. You make your dog's food, you work, you homeschool, you have a podcast. How do you do it all? And I messaged her back and I said, I cry a lot. And every day I think I'm going to get fired. My kids teach themselves a lot. Like, it's self-paced learning, which I harness this incredible guilt for. And like, I mean, the dog food, it's a pain in the neck to make my dog's food, but also I'm trying to protect, I'm trying to hedge ourselves against having a major health problem. And I don't have any control over that. She could get bit by a rattlesnake and be gone tomorrow. So I'm sitting here and she's trying to say, you're doing so great. And I admire you for doing so great. And I'm over here panicking, thinking I'm failing at everything. And I cry. And that's my life. So even though I sit here and host this podcast, I hear what you're saying, and it's phenomenal, and it's grounded information, and I want to take it and run with it. In the back of my mind, this hamster wheel is spinning, Jennifer.
Absolutely.
What is that about?
Absolutely. Well, and you've given such a beautiful example. And I think this is why positive self-talk can sometimes feel a little contrived, right? Because if someone tells you everything is going to be okay and you're in a place where you're like, it doesn't feel like it's going to be okay, even if you're tapped into your faith, and even if you're knowing that God is going to take care of you, you can still feel this sense that I don't know how we're going to get there, right? You
Mm,
can still feel steeped in this, I don't know how to help. I don't know what to do, the powerlessness of it. And so I think that's where this compassion really is just the first step, because I in my practice what I really teach is building the compassion so that you can start asking yourself the questions to understand how your mind is interpreting the circumstances of your life in a way that's creating your guilt, in a way that's creating the pressure or the fear. And understanding, and a lot of times we understand intellectually, right? You told me the story about how one of the reasons why you're making the food is because you're afraid for the dog and you've had this experience and you want to take care of him. So your instincts are to protect your dog, but there's an underlying fear there, which makes sense. But then you can start to ask yourself questions like, so what am I trying to control here that is not really in my control? And
mm,
would I be willing to forgive myself if something like my first experience had happened again? And questions that really kind of get at the heart of what is really going on here for me? What is really at the heart of why I'm feeling guilty? Because sometimes those are thoughts that we really need to look at and understand. You know, the guilt around your kids and how they're schooling, all of that, it makes so much sense, and it's hard to let go until you
mm.
really understand it and find compassion for yourself around it. And so it really becomes a process. And I think for me, having had coaches in the past, what I've really loved about that experience is that it's a guiding friend to be able to ask you those questions, not in a judgmental way, not in a way that is diagnosing you or is pointing to your failures and telling you essentially there's nothing you can do about it, but really helping you to unwind the stories that you tell about yourself and what you're capable of and what the circumstances of your life mean, that really drive how you feel on a regular basis, and starting to find compassion for those emotions so you can move towards healing and finding a more empowered way of approaching your life.
Hey there, peeking in to say, wasn't I right in the beginning when I said that Jennifer was so amazing and sharing so richly and powerfully during this episode? If you think so, it would be great if you could share this episode with a friend of yours right now by clicking share as you listen. Bless a friend today with Jennifer's wisdom. It will be something that they thank you for. I'm sure of it. And now let's jump back into my conversation with my guest, Jennifer Collins. It all makes sense. Like, it all makes sense. And sometimes you just have to hear it from someone else. Maybe like you still believe it, right? And you know it, but hearing it from someone else just adds that authoritative level that we are somehow lacking ourselves. So in your own parenting journey then, you said it's in middle school you start well, when your boys were in middle school, that you started mentally preparing yourself to launch them into their future. What was it while they were in middle school that made you realize now is the time that I need to start getting in the mindset for this?
Well, it was so interesting. There was one day where I was at home. It was a weekend and my boys were off. They were both in a band together, and my husband had actually gone in to form his own band. And so all three of them were off practicing their with their bands. And I was at home cleaning the house, doing laundry after working the whole week. And I looked at myself and I said, how is it that my hobbies are cleaning the house? And, when the boys aren't around, I felt kind of unanchored. And, I had work, I had friends, I had things going on in my life, but I didn't feel this sense of deep purpose and connection at that time in my life. And I started seeing already they don't need me as much as they used to. And I have so much space in my life. And I actually think there must have been a higher power guiding me when I found the work of coaching when I did, because I have to tell you that the skills I learned and built during those middle school years were absolutely critical to me by the time
Mm,
my boys went to high school and they started facing challenges that I could never have imagined that they would face. And having the strength and the courage to be able to understand. I mean, for me, the stories that I really had to unwind in my own head were stories about my own responsibility and my kids' success. And even the stories I felt about my ability to control. Control is such a loaded word, but we really do feel this deep responsibility to guide our kids in the most compelling way. And my oldest son, who has always been kind of so engaged academically, went down a really difficult road his sophomore and junior year, to the point where we really, really struggled and almost lost all connection with him. And it was
mm,
a heartbreaking time. And if it weren't for my belief in the long term possibility for him, even if it meant he left the family, I believed in the possibility that he would come back to us. And so I had to stay grounded in, who do I want to be in this relationship? Who do I want to be for my son and for myself? And it was a question that I kept coming back to. And me beating myself up and judging myself for my failures, which of course we all have them, or blaming my son and holding on to resentment for him and the choices he was making, that wasn't serving me either. And really being honest with myself about who I wanted to be. We talked, my husband and I talked a lot about how we just wanted to keep the light on. We wanted to keep knowing, keep sharing with our son that we would always be there and we would always be a safe space. And he came back to us. And so for me, I feel like the power of being intentional with how you show up for yourself is the light that shines and keeps that connection with your kids, even when they go through the hard times of life. Because the truth is, they will. All of us will face hardship. And being able to trust in God's plan, being able to trust in your ability to stay rooted in love, I think is the gift that we've all been given as mothers, and we all have that instinct. So how do we lean into the love instead of the fear and the frustration? I think that's been my guiding principle.
yeah, and I feel like if I know my listeners as well as I think I do, they are nodding their heads along like, yes, this is absolutely speaking to how I feel and how what I question. And you said something that I want to go back to, though, when you talked about how you and your husband wanted to be and remain the safe space for your son to return to. What were some of the ways that you and your husband differed in your parenting, and then some of the ways that you came together as well as an aligned front in not only in parenting your boys, but in preparing them and preparing yourselves to let go?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I'm really blessed because my husband and I are very aligned in a lot of things, although I am by far the more emotional one. I am by far the one who flies off the handle more. And so, he
I don't
grounds
know
me in.
anything about that.
It is and what I've learned from my husband is it's not that he doesn't have the deep emotions. I think sometimes he'll suppress them more. And
Mm,
this situation with my son tried us both to, and I think we really became aligned in that. And my husband had had a difficult relationship with his father in a way that he really understood the risk of breaking the relationship. And he refused to let that happen. And so I think he was the one who kept saying, we're not going to break anything. And I never wanted to break anything, but there were times when I was really frustrated and really
Mm.
hurt. And it was really a reminder to think about the long-term relationship. I even remember saying to myself at one point, if my son comes back to me when he's 40 years old, I will say, I love you. I'm so glad you're back.
We both need a minute. I love how, and thank you for sharing how your husband's own experience with his parents really influenced how he wanted to shape his relationship with his sons. Because I know that there is no perfect parent child relationship. And we all take things that we experience growing up and we do different things as a result of that. I always marvel at the fact that my sister and I were raised by the very same two people. We were raised as not the exact same way because I feel like she was given a lot more leniency and favor than I was. And she's laughing if she's listening to this now. But also, the two of us, raised by the same two people, went on to have our own families. She and I, not only do we parent differently from how our parents raised us, but we parent very differently from one another.
Mm.
And so there's always going to be these variables and differing factors from one family member to another. My two children, growing up under the same reign of the same two parents, are going to parent their own children differently. And so, what would you say is important to you in imprinting upon your sons that whether or not they raise their children the same as you raise them? And we're here to say they're not going to raise their children the same as you raise them. But what would you hope would be a lasting imprint with them that they will carry on and that will be a legacy for how you and your husband parented them?
I have to say, the first thing that comes to mind is unconditional love.
Mm.
And I think we often talk about unconditional love as if it's assumed that that's the kind of love that we bring to our relationship with our kids. But I think the hard part in parenting is that it's hard not to, at times, put conditions on the relationship. And again, I think it often goes back to this question of safety, right? Because our kids in their exploration of who they are will sometimes take risks or veer off the path that we want for them or what we hope for them. And you always hope that they'll make their way back to the path. But sometimes their path is going to look very different than what you hope. And for me, I think being willing to love my boys no matter what has been a guiding influence, and to be very cognizant of the conditions that I'm placing on the relationship and on who they are, because I think a lot of the pressure that we can inadvertently put on our kids comes from those conditions that we want them to act a certain way and be a certain way. And that's not to say that we should tolerate poor behavior. We absolutely, as parents, get to set healthy boundaries. I think that there's certainly a place for guiding and having rules and consequences, and all of that I think is important, but all through the lens of no matter what, no matter how much you mess up, I'm going to be there and love you. And I feel like that's been something that's, I believe that they've really taken in. In fact, it was interesting because this summer we had both boys home and we actually asked them, I don't know why I opened up this question, but I said to them, well, you're both adults now and you're off into the world. And I wonder, when you guys think about having your own kids, what would you do differently? And my husband looked at me like, why are you opening this can of worms? And my oldest said, well, I have something. And so at first I looked at him and I thought, wow, have you thought about this already?
That was a little too quick.
It was a
Son.
little too quick. And he said, I'm going to give my kids perfect pitch, because he's a musician and he wished that he had perfect pitch. And apparently it's something that everyone's born with, that if you don't cultivate it in your infant, in your toddler, that you lose it. It was
What?
something, it was a fail I didn't know that I had. It was something I didn't know I missed, but it was one of those things that we all laughed and said, wow, that's fantastic. I think that that's a great thing for you to instill in your kids. But thankfully, because it wasn't something that I had ever thought about, I didn't take that personally. But what was interesting was my youngest said, I think I'm going to push my kids harder. And when I tell you, I am that mom who pushes her kids. I was so shocked by this comment because I thought, wow, really, I had high expectations for the kids. And it was another thing I really had to work through in high school, because our kids again are going to meet their own expectations. But I wanted them to do their best. And so I thought in my head, I did push you. The problem is, and I didn't have this argument with him, is that his parents were pushing on a string. And that string is only going to move if it wants to, right? You can encourage them to try harder. And I said to him, those times when you were struggling in chemistry, I did ask if you want a tutor, but it's just interesting how it's a perfect example of how your best intentions are sometimes misinterpreted, or your kids are going to have their own experience and interpret what happened in their own way. And you've almost got to open your heart to all of it because it's all perfect, and he's going to have to learn his own hard way that his kids aren't necessarily going to study harder because he demands it.
Hear, hear.
It was a very, very interesting conversation, but
But what a rich answer from both of them, really. I had no idea that the perfect pitch thing, I didn't know that was a real thing. I've known
right.
people who have perfect pitch
Yeah.
and have been envious of that. Never knew. My parents failed me, obviously.
I mean, who knew? It was so funny.
I
We
have
were
to
just shocked.
apologize to my kids now.
It's so true. Oh my gosh. We laughed at that conversation. It's the beauty. What I'm also experiencing as a mom with older kids is you really have this opportunity to lean into a friendship with your kids in a new
Mm.
way. And of course, we're still parents, and of course, we still have to set boundaries with them, but they're also young men finding their way, and it's such a gift. And I can't tell you how much it means to me and how much I appreciate my relationship with my older son because he came back to us and we've had so many deep and rich conversations about what he was going through at that time, which makes me only realize so much more. If I had believed my own stories about what he was doing and why, I would have severed the relationship, when
Mm.
leaning into that unconditional love allowed me the gift of him coming back to us and opening up about the struggles he was going through. And it's all part of his journey. And I couldn't have changed that for him by doing anything differently. He had to go on that path, and he's a stronger human being for it. And so, in some ways, even through our struggles, there is a purpose to all of it, and we may not see it in the middle of it.
Jennifer, I can't tell you how much I appreciate that point that you just made, because this is a podcast about motherhood, about each guest's individual journey as a mother. But I think even in that and focusing on that, we sometimes forget that our not not our role, but our experience as a parent, as a mother, really does shape our child's experience in going through life. And it's not only the reverse, like, the kids spilling their food or disobeying or picking the wrong friends or the wrong choice at the wrong time. It's not just about that. It's about our relationship with them. And your unconditional love statement about how, I don't know exactly what you said, but how we just assume that that's always there.
Yeah.
Oh my word. This is one of the more rich conversations I've had with the guests, and I'm geeking out over here trying to play it cool. And I want to know one thing though, as you're sharing about how your sons were home this summer, when you let go of your oldest son, was that easier than letting go of your second because you still had one son at home?
I think there were parts that were easy and there were parts that were harder. I
Mm,
actually experienced his whole senior year as this it's like, your whole life flashes before your eyes,
yeah.
and every last he was on the track team, so every last senior night and
Mm,
every senior year is like one long final celebration over and over again. You're reminded of their leaving. And of course, the college process is so stressful. And my son was only just coming back to us. I actually don't even think we were really fully connected until after he graduated. It took us a long time to heal as a family. And, he was back with us, but we were still healing. And so I was appreciating him being back with us, but it was still tenuous and scary. And the college process is scary and you have so many hopes. So when he finally made it to school, I was so happy for him, but dropping your first baby off at school,
mm,
there is something that feels so unnatural about it. You know this is exactly what's supposed to happen. But my husband and I walked away and we both looked at each other and we both said, "Are we really just walking away?"
yeah.
It was definitely a moment where I apparently I needed to cry today too. So thank you for this cathartic
You're so welcome.
experience. We're just having a great, this has been a beautiful, beautiful moment in reflecting. But so that was challenging, but interestingly, I feel like I had already gone through so much of the work of saying goodbye to that son because of what he went through. There was
Yeah,
also a natural letting go because I really respected his independence by that point, and
yeah.
expected I really respected his path. And I had a baby at home, so I knew I
Mhm.
could get home. And one of my most viral posts was a picture of our dog who also has since passed. And he was looking so sad at the top of the stairs. And, it was about saying goodbye, that dogs are empty nesters too. It got so many likes
Oh,
and shares. It was quite a cute post. But,
yeah.
but then we both still had my youngest at home. And I cherished those 2 years with him while he was still ours. And, he took up so much space. He's also a big kid and a wrestler. So he just physically and emotionally, he took up so much wonderful space in our home. But I really was in such a place to cherish it, every single moment of it. And again, because I think I've been on this journey of finding such deep purpose in my work of coaching and specifically coaching moms of teens and empty nesters, I feel such a community around me of women who are all going through this liminal space of holding on and letting go. And, I like to think of it as letting go of all of the painful emotions, but never letting go of your kids. And I
Mm,
think being able to hold on to that and know how connected and in fact how much deeper your connection even can be, even as you let go of the day to day, seeing them and hugging them. It really is a beautiful gift.
yeah. Oh, that's so good. So good. And it makes me curious about this now. I'm taking a turn. So you and your husband are empty nesters. Your lives are different as your children are adults now. What is your life like? What have you done to further cultivate a relationship with your husband, but also to overcome a feeling of emptiness or loneliness without your boys there?
Yeah, it's a great question. I planned my September and October so intentionally. I don't think we were home one weekend the entire month of September. Between, what's so interesting about sending your kids to college is they come back very quickly. And then
Oh,
there's
yeah.
parents' weekends. So, you say goodbye and then they come back. And then, so my youngest was home 2 weeks after he left. And then we planned a trip to Napa with some friends. I'd never been to Napa, but we had a beautiful long weekend in Napa. And we actually, 2 weekends ago, were in Vegas at the Sphere seeing the Eagles. And so I had planned these trips we have never taken. These are
Yeah.
not excursions we took. We didn't leave when the boys were around, but it was almost like I saved it all up for this celebratory moment. And my husband and I have really enjoyed rekindling our connection and friendships and just our friendship and just being together again. And of course, being able to go visit both of them at school, which is always an adventure. So that's been a beautiful thing. And I've been pleasantly surprised when my oldest went to college. And this is always an interesting sticking point with a lot of my clients. Like, how often do you get to connect with your college kid, right? And some of our kids will call home every day, and some of our kids will never call and never text. And so it's figuring out what cadence can I rely on. And with my oldest son, his first year, we rarely heard from him. And interestingly, now he's a junior, he connects back quite a bit more often. But my youngest will call all the time. And it's really kind of lovely to know, oh, wait, they still think about us. They still love us.
Mm.
Or, of course, they still love us, but they still want to connect back with us. And that's been a joy too. And something that I didn't, back to those conditions, I didn't expect it. I just let it be something that I embraced when it came.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I want to do like a part 2 and 3 of and 4 maybe of this, because I still have so many questions, but I'm in that window. My oldest is 15, a sophomore, and that launch day is coming, but in my mind, her I have her birth certificate. I delivered her. I was there
Yeah.
that day. It's not possible that she is 15,
Yeah.
that she is a sophomore in high school. And so I haven't let go of the little girl,
Yeah.
Jennifer, who, was making up princess stories as she's coloring on a piece of paper. Now I'm crying all over again.
Yeah.
What would you tell me and moms like me who are in that stage, and that day is coming? I know it's coming. And weirdly, or maybe it's not weird, you tell me, I feel like I'm more prepared for the launch day of my 11-year-old son
Yeah.
than I am for my 15-year-old daughter. Like,
Yeah.
okay, so what would you offer up for a mom like Val Kleppen in this moment?
No, absolutely. It's such a beautiful question. And it's actually why I coined this phrase, the empty nest straddle, because I
Mm.
feel like we talk about the empty nest as if it's this moment that happens right when you send your kids to college. And I actually think it starts exactly in the moment that you're in, where you've got a middle schooler, you've got an older daughter, you're already experiencing the letting go. You're already thinking ahead to that moment. And in some ways, the fleeting nature of the moment kind of brings all of these emotions. They're all the same emotions, the fear and the desire for connection and the frustration at times and the pride and the sadness that time goes by so quickly. All of these emotions are the same we experience in the empty nest, which is why sometimes we process all of those during high school. So by the time the emptiness comes, we're like, oh, it's not as bad as I thought.
Yeah,
But
it's almost like the anticipatory.
anticipatory grief.
Yes,
Exactly. And
yes.
I think it's truly not one size fits all. I have moms in my practice who are struggling in middle school and they can't wait for their kids to leave because they're dealing with behavior issues and parenting struggles, and it's just too much for them. And there are others who have been empty nesters for a long time and are still working through letting go. And I don't think that there's any perfect way to approach this. And I think I work really hard to normalize all of it because, again, it's so driven by the lens through which we look at our life.
Mm.
I mean, I think of it as all of us are wearing a pair of colored glasses as we look at our life, and that the color of our glasses isn't right or wrong, but it's coloring our experience of our life. And so understanding what that lens is can help you hold on to and embrace the pieces that are working for you and potentially let go of the parts that aren't. And so for you in this space, I think even just knowing that the relationship doesn't end when they go to college, and even this struggle of holding on and letting go does not end when they go to college, because
Mm.
we're we're still thinking about how do we support both of our sons. My oldest is talking about his career after, and we're already thinking, well, is he going to move back home? And, it never
Yeah.
ends. And as my
Yeah.
father will tell me often, I still worry about you all the time. So apparently this is a lifelong journey of holding on and letting go we've signed up for. It just evolves. And I think
Yeah.
the more you can build trust in yourself to be able to, trust in yourself, trust in God, that you can handle what comes and that you will find love and grace. And even in the hard moments, I think that's the way you see yourself through.
Amen to all of that. I'm thinking of the country song Life's a Dance. I don't remember who sings it right now because it just popped in my mind. But sometimes you lead, sometimes you follow.
Yeah.
Don't worry about what you don't know.
Yeah.
Life's a dance, you learn as you go.
Absolutely.
Especially as you were talking about your own dad and that he still worries about you. Gosh, how's my makeup?
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. My face is red from crying. So we've had a lovely connection.
And this has been so enjoyable and informative and inspiring and all of that. And I would say, I think the best next step for the listener then, instead of me doing a part 2, 3, and 4 episode, but hey, I'm game if you are, FYI, is to just have a call with Jennifer, have her walk you through your own personal story. So where can my listeners find you and also take my money, Jennifer?
Oh, you're so sweet. Well, I also have a podcast. I have a podcast called the Almost Empty Nest Podcast, but you can also find me at thesmalljar.com, and you can read all about my coaching practice and learn about my program. I have a coaching program called Mom 2.0, which is really about being that best version of yourself, not only as a mom, but as a woman leading her own life and really leaning into everything that's possible for you, and how to not only love your kids unconditionally, but yourself unconditionally as well. And so I would welcome the chance to speak with anyone. And it's just been such an absolute pleasure to talk with you today, Val.
Thank you. I have loved this. And of course, listeners, all of these links for Jennifer will be in the show notes for the episode. So be sure to check that out. Follow her wherever you can. Jennifer, my sincerest thanks. It has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for being a guest on the Motherhood Experience.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of the Motherhood Experience podcast. To join our exclusive TME community, head over to themotherhoodexperience.com/learn more. Be sure to follow the Motherhood Experience on Facebook or Instagram, and please leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, leave us a comment below, and we'll catch you next time.